All right. We have our first direct-to-DVD film of the year to review, and boys, it's a stinker.
Was Close Range not 2016?
No, that was 2015.
Okay,
That was 2015.
I thought so. Yeah.
We saw Diablo, which stars Clint Eastwood's son, Scott Eastwood. It also stars Danny Glover.
Saying that this stars Danny Glover is so
he has a small role in it.
He has like 2 scenes.
That's right. And the real star of this film is Walton Goggins, who has been in a lot of westerns lately. He was also in Hateful Eight in the latter part of last year, and I have to say, Walton Goggins is crushing it in this movie. He doesn't have a ton of screen time, but without getting into spoiler territory of his character and his purpose, he is fantastic. And I'll also say, Scott Eastwood was really good too, especially in the second half of the film, especially like the third act of the film. Scott Eastwood is really, really good. And the other big compliment I'll pay to this film is that it is a very beautifully shot film. There is some great cinematography, but that's about the only praise you're really going to get, at least for me. Is there anything you want to point out, Austin? At least as far as pros go?
For a January direct-to-DVD movie, okay, are we going into spoilers here?
Let's not.
Let's
keep this short. We're going to make this a short review.
Except for one thing, basically, that happens near the end, or at the end. I actually, for the most part, enjoyed this film, and I thought it was... I actually thought it was pretty cool. And once Clint Eastwood...
Scott Eastwood.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Scott Eastwood gets into his character.
Really gets into
what I mean,
it, yes.
Then he's fantastic.
Yes. The movie, without trying to get into spoilers, the movie is basically it's a Western psychological thriller. And one other pro I will say about the film is that it actually does do a good job with its tone. The movie has a very slow, atmospheric, creepy tone. And I liked that. Like, even before you really understand what's going on, you just know that there is something wrong. Something's just not right. Mm-hmm. And that was really good. And I can compliment that. And that, combined with its beautiful cinematography, really does make the film somewhat engaging. Here's the biggest issue with it. The movie lacks direction. It has a story, but it is so poorly told. It cannot stay focused. And you might argue, well, it's a psychological film. It's common for a psychological film to kind of be somewhat sporadic. After all, it's psychological. This is not good psychological.
No,
this is they don't know what they're doing, and we don't know what's going on.
It's like, okay.
And it's frustrating.
It's almost like the director of this film... I don't have
it. Whatever.
But the director of this film, he wanted to make a psychological thriller film, which is good. But he had all these ideas about how what he wanted to put into this film, but all those things don't really make sense with the plot. So he has his main character doing all these things of ideas he wanted to do for his film, like one after another, but they make no sense with the plot. So it's like just a bunch of random encounters, like psychological encounters, but they don't go along with the plot, so it makes no sense.
And even when, quote unquote, everything comes together, it still doesn't make sense. And even more so, it just doesn't add well. It doesn't feel like okay, well now that scene makes sense, and now I understand why that scene was in the film. It just doesn't make sense, and not in a good way, not in the way that a psychological film should be confusing. It's not engaging. It's boring. There's so many boring scenes in this film, and there's so many random scenes in this film, and all of that for a psychological film again could work if, say, the characters, which there really aren't that many, were engaging. none of the characters are engaging, including Scott Eastwood's character. Again, I think Scott Eastwood did a good job, especially in the third act, but he's not engaging. And when you look at what this character goes through, you want a certain payoff in the climax. You don't get it, folks. Because here is the biggest criticism to give the film. And this is what Austin was talking about that one thing. This has the worst ending I've ever seen to a direct-to-DVD film. And my gosh, is that saying something.
Like the kind of ending where we're not even going to recommend this film because it doesn't even make it worth it.
No. I can't recommend it just for the ending alone. I wasn't going to recommend it anyways, but I was going to be way more
lenient.
Yes, I was going to be like, well, it just didn't quite pass it for me. This, I'm saying, just out of spite to this terrible film, do not see it. Even if it's on Netflix, do not give your time to watch it.
Because in the end, after that ending, it just feels like the whole film is just a waste of time.
It is. Here's to put it into perspective, folks. This is like The Devil Inside, like that kind of ending. This big F you to you, the audience. Just a big middle finger to your face. Disguised as, oh, look how edgy we are. Screw off, movie. Screw off, Diablo. I do like the idea of making a psychological thriller in a Western setting. I like the idea of Scott Eastwood kind of following in his dad's footsteps of doing Western films. I wish there were more Westerns these days. I wish there were. And so I like that. But this ending is just such an insult to you. And you might think, oh, well, these guys are really hating this ending. I almost want to see it just out of curiosity. Don't. Just don't.
Just trust us.
Just trust us. It's not worth it. Go see The Hateful Eight. If you want to see a fun Western film that has Walton Goggins in it, go see The Hateful Eight. So that's really all I have to say about Diablo. Is there anything you want to say to add to it?
I think we've pretty much got all of our stuff out.
Okay, real quick, I want to do another review now. I saw Turbo Kid, because it's on Netflix.
Turbo Kid?
I showed you a trailer for it, that post-apocalyptic, like, 80s throwback with the kid. Yeah, I knew you weren't interested. But I want to review Turbo Kid real quick. So I first heard about Turbo Kid months back. I think back in October. There was an article about it in an issue of Rue Morgue magazine. And it was like, oh, okay, it's like this 80s throwback, post-apocalyptic film. Michael Ironside is the villain.
I like that.
Yeah, and it looked like a really gory film, kind of fun. And it's on Netflix now, so I gave it a watch. And so since it's really new and kind of independent, I thought I would just give a very quick review. There are some fun things about the film. All in all, I do recommend it as like a Netflix watch, as like a free, or if you can, even a Redbox rental, sure. Redbox rental or a Netflix watch, I'd say. The gore effects are mostly practical, and they're really good. If you're kind of a gore fan like me, they're a lot of fun. The music is fantastic. Really fun 80s throwback music. It really drives the film. Michael Ironside is a great villain, as he's always been. And I'll actually say, all the other actors, including the two leads who are like young teenagers, they're really good in the film too. And I'll also say there are some really creative things that they do for the post-apocalyptic environment they're in. And they use their low budget to its advantage. For an example, everyone in the film, they transport through riding bicycles. And it kind of makes sense because it's like, well, it's a post-apocalypse. Like, no one has fuel for cars. So it's like everyone's on bikes. And that kind of makes sense when you think about it. And also, it's a great money saver for your low-budget film because everyone's on bikes. And so there's some really creative stuff like that. And even the story's not that bad. The reason I was disappointed with, or I shouldn't say disappointed, the reason it wasn't as good as I was hoping it would be is because its tone is a little all over the place. There are times where it is exactly what it should be, which is a fun throwback to 80s post-apocalyptic films. But then there are times where it's a little too goofy, and there's also times where it tries to be a little too genuine, of like a adventure coming-of-age film. Like, it tries to be everything at once. When you look at, like, Escape from New York or the Mad Max films, those movies are not comedies. they're very seriously taken. What makes those movies campy and comedic is how over-the-top goofy the characters, usually the villains, are in this post-apocalyptic environment. And you definitely get that in Turbo Kid. But it doesn't just stop there. Turbo Kid also tries to be genuinely funny with just having goofy protagonists and doing goofy shenanigans and having goofy punchlines. And it just doesn't work. A lot of it's not funny. A lot of it is stuff that you've seen in other films. It didn't work in those films. It doesn't work in this film. It tries at times to almost be like a film for younger audiences. But then it will have these incredibly gory action scenes. So it tries to be a little bit of both, and it just doesn't work. So it didn't ruin the film, but it did hurt the film. All in all, I still enjoyed it. It was a very quick sit-through, so I would definitely recommend it for a Netflix watch, but I wouldn't recommend spending too much money on it. So that's my brief review of Turbo Kid. All in all, I give it an average to decent review. Diablo, stay away from that film. Stay away from Diablo. Keep the devil away. Movie sucked. So thanks for listening.